Hello, and welcome to another episode of Great Women in Compliance, hosted by the Compliance Podcast Network and sponsored by Corporate Compliance Insights. I am Dr. Hemma, and I'm thrilled to introduce you to our guest today, Stephanie Weldy, an expert at the intersection of behavior design and employee wellness, and Chief of Staff for Dr. BJ Fogg, renowned author of Tiny Habits, creator of Fogg Behavior Design, and a Stanford University behavior scientist. Welcome, Stephanie. I'm so thrilled to have you join us today.
Thank you, Dr. Lomax. Hemma, so nice to be here with you.
Many of our listeners are in the business of crafting corporate compliance programs with the aspiration of influencing human behavior. So I am so excited to have a discussion with you today and to learn some of the science and application behind Dr. Fogg's behavior design. So thank you for joining us. I wanted to kick it off, if I may, with you telling us a bit about yourself, your origin story in your own words. I like to say, who are you and what brought you to this work?
Yeah, I'm delighted to be here to share. So, my early origins of my career were all about helping connect people to resources that better and improve their lives. So, that was like very centering point for me coming out of my undergraduate work. And I ended up in the public sector. So, I first worked for a nonprofit that focused on comprehensive programming for youth middle schoolers. And I realized it wasn't just educational programming or vocational programming, but also their wellness and their connection to their family and community to show them, wow, what are the possibilities for my life? These were middle schoolers, such a formative time. But for me, I realized, wow, if I could work at a larger organization, I could have more resources, have access to more programming, and just that vision excited me. So I ended up in public sector at a university, which then began almost a decade of work in wellness, employee well-being strategy, sitting in HR alongside benefits teams saying, how do we keep our employees healthy, help them feel valued and supported in the workplace? And gosh, the way I think about it, Hema, is like keep the employee at the center of everything we do as an organization. And funnily enough, so I was at a university at the time and I started my graduate work in education, human behavior, health promotion. And the final semester of that coursework, because I was working full time, going to school part time, I met Dr. BJ Fogg at a conference kind of training that I got invited to. And I'll never forget it was a game changing moment in the course of my life because I met him. And this was, let's say, a Friday or Saturday. You know how conferences are. They're usually like Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or
Hmm.
whatever. It was the last thing I went to. And I left the 4 hour session thinking those 4 hours were so practical and so impactful for helping me think clearly about how I'd go back to the workplace on Monday and write our employee well-being newsletter or plan that next program for spring stress management and so on. So that was how I met Dr. Fogg as well. And it's kind of telling because a couple of years later, I moved out to California with my husband and I just happened to reach out to BJ and say, hey, just curious if you know of anybody using your work. And he said, well, I can think of some people in the area, but let's talk because I need some help with projects. And then began the 8+ years that I've worked with him. And I'm sure I'll be sharing more about that in our conversation.
What a magnificent story. And again, it's strange, isn't it? You just don't know when you're going to be impacted like that and be inspired.
You really don't. And I'll say I can think of three people in that story who changed the game for my life and very specifically my career. And just a couple weeks ago, I reached out to one of them. Her name is Kathy Meacham. She's a seasoned professional in the well-being industry. And I said, Kathy, you inviting me to that training changed my life.
Ah,
And there's another woman who's mentored me, Patricia Benson, also incredible in the well-being field. And, these women in this case have dedicated their lives to employee well-being and helping people. And so for them to have helped me in such a meaningful way, it's really the people on the journey. It's the people you meet and who champion you that really have changed the game for me. So I'm so grateful to be here and talk and hopefully support other women in their careers and their quest to learn information and connect them in ways that will better and improve their lives. So happy to be talking today.
I mean, that's what I'm hearing, Stephanie. Not only were you, inspired by these people and meeting, Kathy and Patricia along the way and Dr. Fogg, but you're also here today to pay it forward. So, so grateful to share some of that.
Yes.
Employee well-being, employee wellness is so important. When did it become such a central concern for the corporate world? And how have our approaches evolved and matured over time to this?
Yeah. I don't know the full history, of course, but I think you can start here. It's like, wow, we realize as people, we spend a significant amount of our time at work. And you often dedicate your lives, especially in public sector. People historically have had long tenured careers, and they become the expert in a certain way that a large siloed organization operates. And so for me, it was the excitement that you could work with a new faculty member who was studying or researching something like totally innovative that I probably never even heard of before I met them. And then you would be helping someone who is tending to the grounds at a beautiful university whose life is, working with the land and helping cultivate beauty on campus. And then really anyone in between with a business skill or a technology skill. And so it helped me work with a variety of people. But here's the thing, and I'm going to be tempted to share some things from Fogg Behavior Design because they're so helpful in the way your listeners will think about their work too.
Right.
The first maxim in behavior design is this: help people do what they already want to do.
Mm.
And if you can connect with the faculty member who is studying this innovation or the groundskeeping team member who is getting extra exposure to heat and like outdoor condition, if you can help that person do what they already want to do, you're on your way for designing effective solutions that support them in the workplace. Now, the needs are different. Like with the groundskeeping team member, they're not at their computer all day. They're getting 10,000 steps a day built into their work environment. Whereas the person who's maybe on their computer running statistics and doing research and data analysis, they're oftentimes in a much more sedentary environment. So, how can we help that individual and then individuals like them at scale? And that's always the really interesting part of employee well-being is kind of two courses of thought. One is a more outcomes based, like we need everyone to do these things. They have to do and hit these metrics, which we would think about as an outcomes based approach, or a participation based, where we offer different opportunities and the ones that align with what you want to do, that's how we want you to engage with the program.
Mm.
So when people talk about employee engagement, or we need to have all employees do this thing, we need to think about how is this helping them do what they already want to do? And that's Fogg maxim number one: help people do what they already want to do. And what's happening there is you're tapping into their motivation, their natural or enduring motivation, and you're helping align with something they already care about. So you're not having to amp up all these external rewards and incentives to get them to do a walking challenge, for example,
Mhm.
but you're helping them say, wow, stay more active so you can feel better on the weekends when you're with your grandkids, or so that you can have better stamina for the hikes that your partner might want to do on the weekends and so on. So I think I'm answering this in a roundabout way, but I think the wellness industry at large and more generally compliance for wellness leaders
Mhm.
can look like, how are we helping people do what they already want to do? That's a question to ask yourself. And how are we aligning with a motivation or an aspiration that this person already has that is already going to propel them towards the offerings like that? So you don't try and motivate everyone at the organization to do the walking challenge, but maybe you provide opportunities for, and these are true experiences, but music around the lagoon at noon. So they have to walk out to the lagoon to get to the instruments, but then they're
Mhm.
joining other people and playing music, which is a de-stressor, it's an energizer, it helps them, as opposed to like everyone must do the walking challenge. And now it's starting to feel punitive, or, well, this is what my employer wants from me, but this isn't what I want for myself. And then you've got some strife to deal with.
Oh, this is just so powerful. I mean, I love the idea of tapping into people's intrinsic motivations and meeting them where they are, right? Not one thing for everyone. You talk about the idea of creating opportunities to do what they want to do. And I start to think, well, gosh, sometimes we want to tell people what to do and we don't think enough about how the values are shared or the mission is shared or the goals are shared. So that's really powerful, I think, for employee wellness, but also for ethics and compliance. So wonderful, wonderful start there.
Yeah, and there are other elements, like, for example, I know HIPAA training or
Mhm.
connectivity training. I was working at the Institutional Review Board for a university for a while. And those are the kind of things that by aligning a compliance related training with something that the researcher already wants to do, like, this innovative research, you have to do these things. But oh, by the way, we can start to explore, and I know we'll get into this. How do we make it easier for them to
Mhm.
do that? And this is probably a classic example in compliance, but the software isn't always like flashy and exciting and throwing confetti at you once you click the button and stuff. So, how do we help the person know you're progressing in an area you care about by completing this
Right.
required software? And I can give an example of that from the world of health promotion. A lot of times, employers will have a health risk assessment that they want an employee to complete annually. This is going to
Mhm.
sound very familiar. And as part of even a participation based program, that was part of the program design at one of my previous employers. And it was the starter step to be in the program for the year ahead and earn that incentive towards your healthcare premiums and so on. But one of the ways that we help make it easier to do was to say, okay, we'll be at every health fair on campus during open enrollment. We can have a staff member who meets with you one on one to help you complete it. We reassured people about the confidentiality of their data, that it was HIPAA compliant. It was their employer was never going to see their answer to those questions. It was our third party vendor. So I think there's some things you can do to assure people, but you'll probably never get 100% of participation. You're reaching for, again, how do you align the thing that's maybe required for the program or for the compliance effort with what they already want to do? And we don't necessarily think about intrinsic and extrinsic. I think more in Fogg Behavior Design, we're talking about like an enduring motivation.
Mm.
Enduring motivation might be like, I want to be an innovative researcher. Like that person doesn't wake up one morning and be like, man, I'm done.
Yes, that's right.
Probably something really deeply wired into them. And same thing on the personal side. Like, I want to be a healthy and active parent. That's never going away for me. To be upfront, I have a 3 and 5 year old boy. So I'm like, I need to be able to teach them how to do push-ups, then be able to do them with them for a very long time. So that inspires me. And that's like a core motivator that I don't think that's going away for me. And hopefully in listeners' context, they can start to know, wow, this is what our employees really care about, or this is the type of employee we're really designing for. And you can even ask employees, you
That's
can
right.
ask trusted colleagues, what is your enduring motivation? What are the things you care about?
I really like this idea of enduring motivation. It does evoke in me the idea of stamina, enduring, lasting, sustainable behaviors. And as you're talking, I'm thinking, gosh, yes, a lot of the things that we do feel like they're a one time thing, but we really do need to think about and strategize for it. And that's what I'm really loving and what I'm hearing is this doesn't sound like luck. I know you've had great impacts in the public sector with employee engagement, the return on the investment for these wellness initiatives. But it's not just luck, is it, Stephanie? I know that you've got a strategy behind it. So maybe we've scratched the surface of what that strategy is, but I really want to unpack some of the intentional strategy and design behind what you were doing there rather than just saying, oh, we built it, they came. It wasn't just that simple.
Yeah, you're right. I think professionals that do a lot of listening, discovery, ask great questions,
Mm.
those are skills that transfer no matter where you are.
Yeah.
You could be in a sales role. Those are great skills. You can be in a health management or health promotion role. Those are great skills. You could be in a legal role or compliance role, right? Those are all great skills. So I think there was a sense of ear to the ground, I think is how we said it. We're always listening. We're always open to feedback. In fact, feedback is what strengthens everything we do every day. So there was a lot of listening. I think, especially Hemma with public sector, employees feel very empowered to share their experience. And a lot of times they can be shut down. It's easy to be the wellness person in the situation, I think, is what I'm trying to say. Because I can go in and say, tell me what your experience has been like. Let's talk about it and let's hear. I was working for county government in the healthiest and wealthiest county in California, at least at the time, and it was in the recent past. And I thought, well, I came from Louisville, Kentucky. Wow, I'm gonna be like podunk, Louisville girl. And I'm gonna be the healthiest and wealthiest. It's gonna be so innovative. And it was like, not so much. Instead, these are just real people with mortgages and families
Mhm.
and caregiver responsibilities and hobbies and careers that they care about. And they care because they're serving, in this case, county residents, and they really strive for great things for them. And there would be, whether it was like the the tax assessor or the election team or the firefighters, I worked across all those disciplines to understand, how do we help your department? And thankfully, we had a representative. We called it like the Wellness Champion Network, where it was one person from each department. Some of the bigger departments had multiples, like Health and Human Services. Oh gosh, I'm guessing, but they had hundreds of employees. And I don't think that's an understatement. So they had more representatives on the Wellness Committee. But those people would represent, in our department, here's what's happening, here's what we need. And so we were always looking for the common thread of, how do we design um, programming that serves what that real true need is? And how are we proactive in, again, we're not in the business of just motivating them to show up to the walk or the complete this annual assessment or get your flu shot or whatever the campaign was. It was like trying to align it with what they wanted. And I'll never forget, there was a guy named Nathan. And one day, oh gosh, I can't even remember what the context was exactly, but I was like, we were just walking down the hall and I was like, Nathan, tell me about what you love to do when you're not under this building, just kind of joking.
Nice.
And he like reached into his pocket, and I have it on my desk somewhere, and he pulled out a guitar pick
Huh.
and he showed me the guitar pick and he said, this is what I love to do. How can we do more of that here at the county? And he was like, what are you talking? And he was like, well, actually, we do have a little band that meets. And I mentioned this earlier, instead of trying to motivate those types of Nathans within the county to come to a walk or come to a stress management class, it was like, come play music at the lagoon. And now other colleagues who want to be walking, they're getting a free show from this awesome little county
Amazing.
band that they formed. So it's a really uplifting field, but I think those lessons and approaches can be applied in other settings, and compliance is not notwithstanding.
No, I agree. Again, I'm hearing purposeful discovery. I mean, it's very easy to say keep your ear to the ground and listen and get feedback. A lot of us do that. But what type of discovery? What questions are you asking? And what do you do with the information? I start to see that if you're intentional about your discovery, you've got a goal in mind, which is enduring behavioral change. Now you're asking the questions that will help you get to what's maybe inhibiting that. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah, and I think I'm going to take it a little bit further, is if you can make some progress with Nathan, let's say it's Nathan,
Hmm.
and he probably was the average age, and it was about like a 47-year-old, predominantly female, actually. So maybe we should call her, uh, Natalie. But
Yes.
the if you can make some progress with Natalie, where okay, you host the band at the lagoon, but now you're offering cooking classes in the cafeteria. Well, Nathan now has a connection within your organization or operation, and they're more intrigued to, well, now what's Stephanie and the Wellness Champions doing? And they feel a sense of belonging. And that definitely is
Mhm.
a core motivator for all humans, like
Right.
belonging, acceptance. And so now, and this is Maxim too, so I'll just go ahead and reveal it. In everything you're doing or designing, Fog Maxim number two, and this is a pattern in every winning product or service that we use every day and love, these four words: help people feel successful. So when Nathan or Natalie are feeling successful participating in what you offer or what the county offered in this regard, now they step up to do other things that previously, if you'd tried to motivate them to come to the cooking classes, they would have been like, not for me. But now they're feeling successful having engaged with the program. So the winning pattern here, to go back, it's like discover what they really care about. That's maxim number one. How are you helping them do what they already want to do? And then fog maxim number two is help them feel successful. You don't leave that to chance. In my world, that might look like, thank you so much for coming to Noon at the Lagoon. We loved hearing the music from the band's name. I'm kind of blanking on it, but I know they had one. Um, don't forget, encourage a colleague to bring their tennis shoes to work and they can join you next week. Invite one person, and I'll get to this. It's like affirm the success that they showed up. And so sign-in sheets aren't just for reporting to HR how many people came to the program. They're for affirming the success of the employees who show up and helping them see themselves as part of the whole of what's happening within the organization. And I think those are the maxims are definitely the pattern to follow. And they reflect Dr. Fogg's research. And I think we'll pivot there possibly, but from studying human behavior for the last 30 years at Stanford and in industry, saying, what are the patterns? And those are the two statements, handfuls of words, but that represent every product or service that we love. They do those things for us. They help us do what we already want to do, whether it's as a parent or as an employee and so on. And they help us feel successful. So they're affirming that identity and they're affirming that engagement, in this case with a wellness program.
Here we go. Oh, just such beauty in the simplicity of the two maxims as well. They're not difficult to remember and they're very rewarding. I'm sure in your position, you feel very rewarded with the work you're doing, but they're super powerful. And again, I'm hearing you say about the belonging. It sounds like there's trust as well that you've been able to build, right? With Nathan or Natalie, they trust you now. Their feedback wasn't futile, it was heard. In fact, one of the ways of, I guess, describing belonging is they were seen, heard, and valued, back to your point about the affirmation of them turning and doing that. So magnificent. Okay, we've held on long enough. What do we need to know about the Fogg behavioral model and how can we leverage the science behind it to influence behaviors for good?
Yeah. So for the past 8 years, I worked with Dr. BJ Fogg, who studied at Stanford since the late 90s, did some early understanding and work in persuasive technologies, and then really pivoted in about 2010 to studying human behavior. And the pivot is because he discovered what he calls the Fogg behavior model. And the behavior model is just this: you can understand human behavior, any behavior, and have that behavior happen when three things come together at the same time. You have motivation to do the behavior, ability to do the behavior, and a prompt. And so often you'll hear us say BMAP, or the written model looks like B equals MAP.
Mhm.
But this is the phrase to use. Behavior happens when three things come together at the same time: motivation to do the behavior, ability to do the behavior, and a prompt. And so having that model in place, he developed this original system, this set of models, ways of thinking, like the Fogg behavior model, and methods, ways of doing or designing, that together make up this system called behavior design. And the maxims underpin the system. They're like the foundation of the system because he wants, of course, the system to be used for people to be healthier and happier. We're not training soda companies or training people to make candy or screen more addictive. We want them to design products and services that help the world be a better place. And I've helped him do that here for the last 8 years. We primarily train industry innovators who are building new products and services, whether it's physical health or financial wellness or anything from educational services to legal services that are about how do we help people do what they already want to do? This will sound familiar, and help them feel successful. It's not guesswork, it's a system.
Mhm.
And once you understand the cornerstone model, the Fogg behavior model, you can use the system for analysis. So some of your listeners might be thinking, Wow. So we really tapped into what people cared about. And that's why we got such great response rates on
Mhm.
that survey or in that program last spring to use it for analysis, analyzing what's working or why isn't it working. And then you can learn the methods for design. And a tool like the Fogg Behavior Model, it looks very elegant and simple. BMAP. It's you can understand it in 2 minutes or less, but it can scaffold and scale to large behavior change. And so it can help you influence hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, and more people in one thing by saying, how do we get the behavior to happen? Well, we have motivation, ability, and a prompt all at the same moment.
Now you've got my attention. I am captivated. Impact at scale when it comes to behavioral change is our love language. So let's dig a bit deeper now and unpack this. So behavior equals the coincidence of motivation, ability, and prompt. Let's go to motivation first.
Yeah.
Why isn't motivation or willpower enough?
Oh my gosh, such a good question. Well, you can tell from the model, and we understand from the model that it can't just be motivated. You could be highly motivated to do something, like a personal example. Okay. I work from home. Last week, I was doing some wash and I noticed there's a lot of water on the ground. So it was time to get a new washer. I'm highly motivated to receive my new washer from Costco or whatever today when they get here. But I have the ability, I'm at home, but I don't have a prompt.
Mhm.
So I'm waiting for Costco to delivery services or whoever it is to call me and say, we're here with your washer, or when can we schedule it? So motivation is not enough in that example. Let's take if it were my husband who was responsible for the delivery. Motivated, he doesn't want water from the second floor coming down to the
Right.
first floor, right? Maybe he's getting the email from Costco while I'm doing this recording from you. He doesn't have the ability. He's at work and his
Wow.
is not in this home. So we can use a really simple, like everyday behavior, like this it's actually a one time action, getting receiving the delivery, but motivation isn't enough.
Mhm.
You have to have the ability. A person has to be able to do the behavior, and a prompt or the thing that says do this now. And a prompt is like a light changing from red to green. You don't go before that light changes. The prompt is a moment in time. Now, it could be that Costco is sending me emails or texts and I'm not getting them because I'm on a call with you. But notice it's not just motivation, and the model makes that really clear. In fact, in the system of behavior design, we don't rely on motivation or willpower at all. The real focus when a behavior designer approaches a behavior challenge, your first move as a behavior designer is to say, how do we make this easier to do? How do we make the compliance questionnaire three essential questions instead of 32?
Right.
And then the people who do the three, those are our best customers. They're motivated and able. Now, how do we prompt them to do the 27 or 29 extra questions that we needed to get answered? Because maybe you don't need them, maybe you do. But if you can't get someone to complete three questions, you're never going to get them to do 29.
That's right.
So the behavior design approach, and this is going to move into your next question probably is ability, but it's to always look, is the behavior specific enough? And how do we make it easier to do? And I can give you some examples of that. The survey example is probably a little too generic, but it at least makes the point.
Good way to
By
go.
having it be three questions, suddenly it just takes like 3 minutes at the most, right? Instead of 32 questions, which could take much, much longer.
Right. I mean, look, no one's motivation's high to do a survey or a questionnaire, right? So you've got to compensate, I guess, with the other things. I think, again, and I'm just thinking back to the compliance profession, we often go to enforcement when it comes to motivation. We're like, if you don't, X will happen, we'll bother your manager. We tend to try to up the motivation all the time without necessarily, to your point, thinking about how easy it might be to do, let alone, the prompt. So I'm also, as you're talking about motivation, I'm thinking about how motivated I am at first of the year, January 1st. I'm very motivated to do a whole bunch of resolutions. And why, Stephanie, am I not doing them in February? Like, what's going
Oh
on?
my gosh. I'm so glad you brought that up. Okay. So, a couple of things to think about. In the workplace, there are often incentives and punishments, and they're real. Like, we really need you to do this, or you have to stop your research, or
Right.
you
Or else.
program. And it's a very real thing. Let me come back to that in just
Mhm.
a moment here. The co- the core question there is that really as heavy handed as you want to be?
Mm.
My guess is sometimes in compliance that's necessary. Like IT security, you probably do have to be very heavy handed. But I imagine the people who get hired or people who are working for your company, they want to do a good job. Could be that they don't know how, or they don't know how to identify a phishing email, or they don't know how to log into their encrypted network when they're traveling for business or what have you. That speaks to my point earlier about making the behavior very specific. And
Mhm.
we'll come back to that. The question about motivation, Dr. Fogg and actually a gentleman named Dr. David Sobel, they were studying motivation together. This was in Dr. Fogley's industry trainings, and Dr. Sobel was with a large healthcare system in California for a very long time for his career. And they named this concept that motivation fluctuates. It really had never been identified before as a fluctuating mechanism. Like right before lunch, you're very, very hungry. After lunch, that wanes, and they named that the motivation wave. And so that explains why in January, when everyone's talking about supplements are on sale and join the gym and new year, new you, that's a big motivation wave to maybe prioritize our health or be more compassionate. It's Valentine's Day. Show people you love them. Here in the States, these are the kind of big pushes of energy around love and so on. Well, those are great times to take on either new one-time actions, like sign up for something, buy something, hire someone, commit to something. But what we seem to be really bad at doing as human is predicting future motivation.
Mm.
So by doing one-time actions when you're in a motivation wave, that's really the breakthrough moment to do hard things. That's when employees can do hard things. So if you think of it as like maybe in the compliance space, it's like you're coming up on your annual work anniversary. We have a celebratory, gosh, I hope it's more than an email that says, congratulations, you've been in our company for 6 years or whatever. But we have this celebratory thing to help you prepare for that. Please do X, Y, and Z. You need to have your up to date training certificate. You need to fill out your performance management
Nice.
form and da da da. So you tap into that natural motivation wave as opposed to sending them the email on a random Tuesday when they're already inundated with work and personal commitments. And it's like, hey, here's this 3-hour training we need you to go to.
Mhm.
Sign up now. How can you align that desired action with a time when they might be naturally motivated to take on something new?
Very smart. I love that. And also, I feel like it's not just me then. There is like ups and downs. Yay.
No, no. And that's why the system doesn't rely on willpower. Hemma, it's like go back to willpower is not a winning part of the solution. Instead, design it for when a person is naturally maybe a little bit higher motivation. And these things are both predictable and unpredictable. But for example, like the first of the month, we kind of have this rise in motivation to tackle big things or start a new project or get our bearings and our calendars together and so on. And then around your birthday, maybe I just turned 40 a month and 1 day ago.
Happy
And
birthday.
thank you. And around my birthday, I was very motivated to reconnect with people I really care about,
Mm.
plan my health appointments and make sure that I was like getting those done. I did this special thing where I put together I called it new to now because so much of my life has got like 40 years. That feels very significant to me. And I was like, I don't want to forget that I was 25 here and 35 here. And pretty soon those are going to be much closer together than where I am to either of those. So I put together this new to now photo album. And my boys love to sit with me and look through it. And that's just a very small example of like, celebrate how far you've come. And it really did this. It helped me feel successful about wow, I've come a long way in my career and my life and my family. And I want to look back and appreciate that as opposed to being like, oh, I'm not 25 anymore. I wouldn't trade with 25-year-old Stephanie, but there are things to appreciate about it.
I love that. And there's a couple of things you've done there for me. For firstly, motivation is going to wane. It's going to be on a wave. But now you've taught me that the wave isn't to be wasted, right? The wave is actually quite helpful. And I'm guessing as we go into the ability piece, that when you've got that way, that's a great moment to design the endurance behaviors that you want. So say you say to yourself in January or your 40th birthday, this is what I want my life to look like going forward. You've got the energy and you've got the motivation at that moment, but you need to design for sustained behavior. So how do we do that? What's the next step after
So
motivation?
good. So for me, let me use like an everyday example. So on Sundays, I look ahead to the week and my husband and I talk about what's coming up. Do you have a late night? Do you have social commitments and so on? And that's the point because I'm highly motivated. I'm coming off the weekend. I'm going to schedule my workouts. I'm going to look up recipes and do meal related planning. I'm going to pull anything that's like my son went on a field trip today. So pull the things that I need to make sure are ready. I'm not going to leave it to the Wednesday night scramble. I'm going to try and get ahead of it. So when you feel that wave surging, that's when you can do hard behaviors.
Mhm.
But that's the exact opposite of how to design for everyday behaviors. And this is
Mm.
where ability comes in. So the superpower or the behavior hack, so to speak, is to look at ability. And if you go to behaviormodel.org, you can see the visual representation of the Fogg behavior model. And you can see that the delta, there's an action line. It's a kind of a happy curved line. Imagine a motivation is on the y axis, abilities on the x axis. Both are a range of high to low. But when you have high ability, something is easy to do. When you have low ability, it's hard to do.
Mhm.
And then there's a trade off because motivation and ability on the model work like teaming. So if one is strong, the other can be weak. And in this case, the delta over the action line for ability, if something is really easy to do, you can have those changing, fluctuating levels of motivation. And so the hack is to try and make desired behaviors very easy to do.
Mhm.
So I'm not guessing when I'm going to work out on Thursdays. I know exactly when that class is scheduled. I'm not guessing, am I going to eat a salad or soup for lunch? I've already cleaned the lettuce, it's ready to go. I'm not guessing, what am I going to make for a meal plan this week? It's written out. So when I'm in that Sunday motivation wave, I'm getting ready because I know once the work week starts, the projects come in, the kids are homesick from school or weather related closures and so on. I don't want to leave it to chance. And so that's the hack is help it be very easy to do so that regardless of your motivation to some degree, you have to have some motivation. It can't be zero, but it can be pretty low and you can still do the behavior. And this is where Dr. Fogg's method called the tiny habits method fits into the system. So the broader system's called behavior design, or more and more, we're really calling it Fogg behavior design. The model helps us think clearly about human behavior across all cultures, all behaviors, even behavior types, like a one time action versus a daily habit. Those are different behavior types, but you
Mhm.
can use the model to analyze them. And the method Tiny Habits basically says take any existing behavior that you do after I get out of bed in the morning, my feet hit the floor, I will say, it's going to be a great day. And then you celebrate. And this is the feeling of success that I talked about earlier. You do something to fire off a positive emotion. And it's that positive emotion that wires in the behavior. So in his book, Tiny Habits, Dr. Fogg writes a whole chapter and it's emotions create habits,
Mhm.
not repetition. It's not hitting streaks and gold medals and whatever. It's the emotion you feel as you do the behavior. And we can dig into this if you want, but that delta over the action line that I've been talking about, that let's call it real estate, just to be really
Yeah.
clear. The real estate on the model where something's really easy to do and it accounts for your fluctuating motivation, that's where you design new habits into your life. So
Mhm.
that when the kids are sick or the projects are overflowing, you still can take care of yourself. You still can make progress in your career. You still can tend to your community and your family, all the while hitting the things that matter for you in your day to day life.
So something sustainable that won't get knocked off course easily by those day-to-day things because you've made it so easy for yourself.
Yeah,
That
you've
right?
designed it. Yeah, and I would you've designed it in a way
Designed
that
it.
accounts for how human behavior really works.
That's the magic for me. I mean, I love this idea of I'm hearing set myself up for success when I've got the motivation for sustained success through this design. Okay, so we're going to get back to the design. So we've talked about motivation and ability. Before we move on to prompt, I have a question for you. Does this work the other way around if I want to stop an undesirable habit? Because
Such
I
a good
can think of
question.
myself like one of the things that derails me a lot is my morning habit of picking up my phone with the alarm. Sometimes I hit the snooze button, but the worst one is when I don't hit the snooze button, I'm there scrolling on social media for
Yes.
a while. So
Yeah.
can I stop an
That's a good
undesirable habit
question.
with the same science?
Yes, exactly. So the same model applies to troubleshooting either why a behavior is not happening, or in your case, stopping an undesired behavior. Let me say one thing. When it comes to a behavior that you don't want in your life, and we're back to the behavior model, so B equals MAP,
Hmm.
all you need to do is remove your motivation, remove ability, or remove the prompt. It doesn't even have to be all three. Now, it could be all three hypothetically, but
Right.
you just remove one of those and the behavior won't happen. So, for example, if you delete the social media app off your phone, Hemma, it's a one time action that you would do, delete the app. That stops the daily habit in a lot of ways, right? You probably won't be that extreme with yourself in many cases. But for example, if you find you're snacking and gosh, I work from home. So that's one I can I speak from personal experience. So it's like, if you find you're snacking on things that you're like, this is less than good for me and I'd like to get a handle on it, it could just be, you might say to your partner or spouse one time, or you say to yourself, I will not buy this food when I go to the grocery store this weekend, or
Mhm.
let's commit to not buying this food anymore and bring it into our house. So one time action, you say that out loud or you commit to it. Maybe you write it down on a post-it or whatever you do. Mine would be saying to my husband, like, we're not going to buy ice cream anymore. And then when you feel that internal instinct, that prompt, it's like, I want some ice cream, or basically, I want to escape this hard project. So I'm going to go get a snack. You're being prompted, but the behavior is impossible to do because there's no
Uh-huh.
ice cream in my freezer. I'd have to get in the car, drive to the grocery store, probably miss a bunch of meeting, make no progress. Like, I'm not doing that, So basically, you just remove one of those elements, motivation, ability, or prompt. Really hard to remove the motivation for something like social media. What
Mhm.
I might recommend instead is removing the app or removing your login credentials or something. The other power move, and I don't know if this will help with social media so much, is you just, your alarm clock moves out of your bedroom. This is what I did a couple of years ago.
Right.
It's in my bathroom. I have to get up, go all the way into my bathroom. By the time I'm there, I have this other habit, Hemma, and I don't know if this will serve you, but someone told me that like at least your first 15 minutes of the day, don't look at your phone. And so slowly I built up, I don't even look at my phone at all for the first 15 minutes. And that means I'm kind of stumbling down to the kitchen, getting water, getting coffee, probably saying good morning to my husband, getting out the lunch boxes, all the mom routine things I do. But that's a motivation thing. You have to be motivated to do that. So the question is, how do you make it harder for you to get on social media and potentially less desirable? So you
Mhm.
could read some articles that are like how bad it is to be on social media 15 minutes after you wake up. And that's going to dig more into the motivation side of things.
Mhm.
But removing the prompt will solve the problem. So you could delete it. Making it really hard to do, like not saving your login credentials, that would stop the problem.
Mhm.
And the motivation thing, you just don't rely on it. So I would say if you could do one of those others, what do you think? React.
I'm loving one thing I'll say is I'm highly motivated because, like you, I've got young children, and so it would be really nice if I could figure this out before they start using their cell phones as a prompt. They don't have cell phones yet, but there's a future where they will. So I'm thinking I need to buy a normal alarm clock, and like you said, get the phone out of the bedroom. I think that's really as simple as that because the prompt really is the fact that the alarm clock is the reason I'm picking up the phone, and maybe another alarm clock that's not a phone will do that.
Right. Right.
And to your point, the phone's there. If you know me, I'm not going to cancel LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn, but I can do that
Sure.
later in the day, right? It doesn't have to be in the morning. So yeah, I love that. Again, you're giving levers, right? You're giving levers for us to choose how to
Yeah.
design future behavior. And you just are the discovery question of what's your motivation. I think I've got it. Not, I'm not afraid enough for myself, but I'm definitely afraid as a parent that I'm modeling this behavior and it's not healthy. So
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think what we did there is with behavior design, again, that's kind of the analysis thing. What's really happening here? And then how do you design effectively for it? Well, you offered the solution. You're like, I'm just going to buy a standard alarm clock, battery powered or whatever it is. And once you see it, it's like, duh, this wasn't a motivation problem. This isn't a character flaw. This isn't
mm,
you're addicted or whatever. It's a design problem. And the same way we would approach redesigning our home office if it was not supporting us, or redesigning our living room if we couldn't see the TV the way we wanted to or whatever. You can redesign your behaviors to be more health promoting or more supportive of employees in the workplace. It's not that they're flawed or it's not that they don't care. It's that we haven't historically approached designing them effectively. And that's where you can use the behavior model and the broader system, bringing it back for listeners to designing more effective solutions in the compliance workplace. And it's not guesswork. It doesn't rely on willpower, not the employees that are wrong or us as human beings that are so flawed. It's the way we've approached it. And this system gives a new way of understanding how to approach it that really does influence and change the behaviors. Again, at scale.
it's magnificent. And one thing I want to underscore that you said, it's not a character flaw. Again, my breathing. And we're so hard on ourselves. But what I love about you underlining that for our listeners is, again, we don't want to judge others thinking it's a character flaw on their part when they don't do what we say in our policies or what we've asked them to do by way of process. And I feel quite empowered. I'm like, oh, if I reimagine what I do through these lenses, maybe I can redesign the behaviors I want to influence and make it easier or a different prompt for people. And then not judge them as defectors or people that just don't care or people that, want to be unethical. That's not what we're really dealing with at scale. There might be the
Right.
one or two, but as a general proposition, this fills me with inspiration and hope because on a human first humanitarian kind of look at this, people, as you said, they want to be doing the right thing. We know this
Yeah.
intuitively, back to your maxim, help them do the right thing with some intentional design. Oh, I'm just blown away. Thank you, Stephanie.
Yes. And I think I'll bring this back to the compliance professionals themselves. They don't want to be seen as nags. They don't want to be seen as the enforcers. They want to be seen as people who help an organization thrive and stay above board and have policies that are employee friendly and forward thinking. However, there is a hard line in terms of people will have to do certain things. And that is the space, coming back to it, for some use of incentives. But one of the things you can think about when it comes to motivation is motivation acts like vectors on the model. And you can see some videos at behaviormodel.org/video. And they show how instead of pushing up on motivation to try and get people's motivation to be higher for the behavior, you can address what's demotivating the behavior.
Mm.
So I don't think I'll be the only person out there who's like, once I'm out of bed, my day begins. And it typically doesn't end until I'm back in bed that night.
Mm.
That's a long time, you know? So you're kind of demotivated to get out of bed. It's kind of soothing or something. It's offsetting an anxiety to stay in bed and scroll social or whatever. You're not a bad person. It's just, it's satisfying something for you. So instead to address the demotivators that are like, for the social media one, like I'm going to miss out on things. I'm going to possibly have a connection that I'm really excited to hear their reaction to it and so on. To address this, let's use the motivator of hope and fear. Instead of
Mhm.
trying to get somebody super excited for the program or hope it's going to mean their advancement in their career, you say, what's stopping you? And you try and release that demotivator. And so whether it's a personal example or a professional example, you can address the demotivator and then the hope naturally rises.
Mm.
So
Okay.
suddenly the person, because you addressed what was demotivating the situation, they're now above the action line and they can be prompted, okay, do the behavior, right? And for many of us who are professionals trying to do our best work in the world, we don't want to be seen as the people who have to like nag you or get you to do stuff you don't want to do.
Right.
We want to be on the team of helping you do what you want to do. That's why the maxims are so amazing. And I almost can't not talk about them because they are part of every winning pattern or solution. Even when you have to address motivation, you can do it in a way that helps the person feel valued.
Mhm.
And like we're saying, they're not the problem. We just have to align it and time it. That's timing the prompt. But again, it all comes back to motivation, ability, prompts. So these aren't guessworks. This is a conversation where we're hypothesizing how people might use it. But if you tap into them when they're motivated, make it really easy to do and prompt them when they can do the behavior, wow, you're on your way and you're going to have better results and better results at scale.
Mhm.
You're probably going to feel better about doing your job in the meantime, right? Like
When
everybody wants.
wins all over the place. I mean, just again, as you're talking, I'm thinking, gosh, I don't want to be a nag at home or at work. And this side, it's really easy to get into this mindset that you're banging your head against a brick wall. But actually, back to the maxim, you're unlocking people's ability to do what they already want to do, right? Figuring out what the blockers are, unlock those things. And just that mindset, it's like, it's not that my kids don't want to tidy their room. It's just that I'm going about the nudging in the wrong way. I'm not making it easy for them. Maybe it seems like a behemoth task for them. I'm not sure. Same with work. It's not that the employees don't want to do what my policy says. Maybe my policy is not easy to do, right? Maybe
That's
I
right.
don't know how to prompt it. So I love those self reflective questions. It makes me feel very excited about what we do. So thank you for that. For our listeners and myself, like, who want to learn more, where should they go? Where would you direct them? You've given us a couple of websites, and we'll share them.
Yeah.
But what would you recommend for the uninitiated that want to experiment with this model in their work and at home?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you can go to bjfogg.com, FOGG.com to learn more about Dr. Fogg and his work. We do train industry professionals in how to use the system. There's an online course that you can do, pretty low bar, or there's a higher live training course where you can learn to think in this way and apply it in your work. And we've trained lots of people in IT security, compliance related roles. A much lower bar is just to get Tiny Habits, his book, New York Times bestseller. And you can read it for the behavior design work, or if you're interested in designing personal habits for yourself, you can read it in that way. Oh my gosh, if there's health and well-being professionals out there, I would highly recommend Hero, called the Health Enhancement Research Organization. Like I said at the beginning, so many people and have mentored or invested in me. And so if I can give back anything, it's just really maybe reach out to somebody who's helped you and thank them. Like just genuinely thank them. That's helping them feel successful for a time when they poured into you. And then also look around. Who can we help? I just think that's in an increasingly automated world where so much is becoming about AI and we're having to just sift through how do we use this? How do we integrate this new tool? Going to give us amazing capabilities, but I'm more and more convinced of that human touch, that human connection is going to be essential for us. And what a better way than to thank someone? So it's just such a privilege to share this with you, but I feel delighted to share it because I think it's going to help your listeners. And I hope that the conversation has connected with what they really want to do and how to be more effective in doing that. So thank you for the time to share. And especially to surface it for women who are giving so much of themselves on so many fronts usually. That's a real privilege for me to speak into that world. And thank you, Hemma, so much for inviting me and being such a lovely host for having the conversation.
Oh, you should be thanking me. I should be thanking you. I will say on a personal note, I do have the New York Times bestselling book, Tiny Habits. I'm reading it myself. I've started to apply it. I am now drinking water, having breakfast, and moving in the mornings, right? I've given myself tiny things to do before noon, and it's working for me. So I highly recommend it. Thank you for sharing those resources. I'm going to say if this episode has impacted you, our listeners, why don't you reach out to Stephanie and let her know? Because I think she's right. It is important to let people know it's definitely impacted me, and I feel very excited about how we can apply this maxim in our space and at home. So wonderful to speak to you, Stephanie. I hope this will be the beginning of a beautiful friendship, and we'll continue to learn from each other and learn how we can apply these methods. But you've been a wonderful guest, and I'm grateful to you for your time.
Thank you so much. It was a delight to be here with you and get to know you better in the conversation too.
Likewise.